Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about using a mill dot scope. Okay, so let me show you guys what a mill dot scope is. All right, so if you look at the crosshairs there, you see how you got those little dots. Okay, now those dots have value. Okay, and there's two types of scopes. They have one measuring system that runs on MOA and another, minutes of angle, and they got another one, which is the more common one, which runs on mil dots, or I think mil radians. That's what that's short for. So you gotta know what type of a scope you have. Now this one is a fixed for power. Okay, so there's no, you can't zoom in or zoom out. If you do have one that you zoom in and zoom out, you gotta know if you got a first focal plane or a second focal plane. I did a separate video on that. The reason is if you have a first focal plane, the value of those dots, the measurements, will remain consistent as you zoom in and out. If it's a second focal plane, then the value of those dots only means something, usually if you're fully zoomed out, okay? It doesn't mean anything as you zoom in because the space between the dots basically changes, okay? So this is a fixed full power. There's no adjusting zooming in or zooming out. Now, with this one, if you notice that there's basically a bunch of dots there, there's no space in between. There's no like lines in between the dots on some scopes, especially ones that like zoom out. You can also have space in between the dots so that you can make even more precise measurements. Okay, so this one, I would call this like a combat scope, right? Because you just got your mills, and really you can maybe make a guess where the halfway point is in between the mill dots. At best, maybe guess where the quarter is, but that's pretty much, so basically this scope is designed to get you to hit center mass, basically a target that's like 3 feet long by 2 feet wide out to about 500 yards. You're really not going to be able to accurately hit anything past that, although you can use the scope to range past that and just know how far something is. Okay, so let's go back to talking about how the scope works. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys the cheat notes, okay? Because there's a complicated formula down here that we're going to talk about at the end, okay? And what I want to do is I just want to jump straight to the cheat notes, because if I watch this video in the future, right, and I am kind of doing this video for myself because I haven't used this in about 8 years, and I kind of forgot how to use this, and I had to refer back to my notes. So I wanted to make a video because I'm going to be using this, let's say, for the next couple of weeks, and at some point I'm going to stop using it. Well, if I come back to this after a couple of years, I want to have a video that I can refer back to, okay? So here we are. Now, if you look at the crosshairs, it looks something like this, right? You got a cross and a whole bunch of lines. Now, that scope over there has 14 mil dots. And I recommend, if you're going to buy one, get simpler is better. I would recommend you start off with one that only has 10 of the, a total of 10 lines from bottom to top, or from top to bottom. Because if you've got too many lines in there, it can be easy to get lost in there, okay? So anyway, mine has 14. I'm just gonna be using a total of 10 lines here, and it doesn't make a difference. I mean, the value of these lines is the same regardless of whether you got 8, 10, or 14. Okay, so the cheat notes. Okay, if I got a man, okay, and I put him in the crosshairs, right, and he stands a total of 10 mil dots, right. So from the bottom here, right, from the bottom of the scope, right, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We're including this line that goes across. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And I'm including the top of this, even though there's no line. Okay, that's a total of 10 mil dots. So at 200 yards, my man, the average man, which is about 5'10", right, is gonna stand 10 mil dots tall. Okay, at 300 yards, that same man is going to stand 6.5 mil dots tall. So he's going to come up to about here, right? 6.5 mil dots tall. Now, going back to here for a second, because remember, there's also lines on the side, even though I haven't included them over here. You can see them down here, right? You can see how I would have the lines off to the sides over here. The width of this man, that's about 5'10", the width going across would be about 3 mil dots wide, okay? So if you don't get to see the full length of him, you can also, you know, estimate his range based on his width, okay? So at 200 yards, my man's gonna be 10 mil dots tall, okay? And then 3 mil dots wide. Now, if he's bigger than that, not a big, you know, easy stuff, right? Because with the, if you've got a 50-yard zero, you got your first zero at 50 yards, bullet drops up, right is about 3 to 4 inches at 100 yards, comes back down at 200 yards for your second zero. So from zero distance out to 200 yards, we're really not concerned, right? We just put the dot, you know, dot in the center over here, and we're gonna either be 4 inches high, 4 inches low, okay? Or even right here, right? 4 inches high, 4 inches low, if this is all you can see, okay? So if we can see this man and he's 10 mil high or bigger, if he's bigger, the same thing, put the dot in the center, pull the trigger, okay? You know, all right, so we know that he's at 200 yards or closer if he's bigger, okay? So at the 300 yards, he's gonna be 6.5 mil dots high, okay? And 2 mil dots wide, okay? Now your holdover, right? If you're gonna, because now basically at 300 yards, what you're gonna do is you're gonna put this, the cross over here, the center of the cross, right? If you put it on his face, it'll drop about 12 inches to his chest. Okay, so the same thing you would do with a red dot. There's no, you know, at 300 yards, we're really making a really fine adjustment. We just need to know that the guy's at 300 yards and not at like 400 yards or 500 yards. You know, we need to know that he's at 300 yards. Once we know that he's at 300 yards, because we've mil dotted him at 6.5 mils, right? We just put the dot, the crosshairs here. Bullets are going to drop about 12 inches into his chest. Okay? All right, now at 400 yards, things start to get really interesting, because our man is going to stand about 5 mils high. Okay, so here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right up to the center, you know, the cross over here. He's going to be 5 mils high, okay, and he's going to be 1.5 mils wide. Okay, so 5 mils wide, 1.5 mils wide. Okay, so if he's sitting down or something, you can try to use his width to range him. And once you know that he's at 400 yards, right, then your holdover is 1 mil. Okay, so basically, instead of putting the cross in the center of his chest, you would put the line right underneath it in his chest. And now, of course, you got to test it with your ammunition, with your barrel length. There's a lot of variables here, but it should get you. This should get you close enough when you go to the range and you practice. It'll get you on the paper, and then if you gotta do some fine adjustments, you can do some fine adjustments. Okay, so at 400 yards, he's going to be 5 mils tall, 1.5 mils wide, and our holdover is going to be 1 mil. Okay. At 500 yards, our man is going to be 4 mils tall. Okay, so from the bottom, right, we're standing 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, he's going to line up with line number 4 there. Okay, he's going to be only 1 mil wide. Okay, and our holdover is going to be 2 mils. Okay, our holdover is 2 mils. So basically, we're going to put this, you know, from the cross down, 1, 2. We're going to put the second line here in the center of his chest. All right, you know, that's where we're going to aim. Okay, we're going to use the second line on this reticle. Okay, now, whoops, I'm trying to drop this. So now, past 500 yards with this type of a scope, basically my particular scope, it's not, I really can't fine tune it. You know, I can't zoom in, so it's hard for me to shoot past 500 yards, but I can still range and know if somebody is at, let's say, 600 yards, and to me it's like, okay, he's at 600 yards, you know, either I gotta get close to him or he's gotta get closer to me. Okay, so at 600 yards, my man is gonna be 3.5 mils high. Okay, so so from the bottom, 1, 2, you know, you would go up 3.5 mils All right, so you know, basically, if he comes up to 4 mils, I know he's at 500 yards. I know I can take the shot. If he only comes up to like, you know, that's, you know, I'm sorry, what is it? If he comes up to 4 mils, I know that I'm at 500 yards. I'm good to take that shot. If he only comes up to like 3.5 mils, I know he's way further out. He's at 600 yards. You know, I probably shouldn't waste my ammunition. Okay, same deal. If I see 3 mils, right? So if I count from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, I know he's at about 700 yards. 2.5 mils, he's at 800 yards. And if it's only 2 mils, right? If he comes up to 1, 2, I know he's at 1,000 yards. Okay, so this is useful information because even though I may not be able to shoot him with a 5.56 at 1,000 yards, at least I know what distance he's at. I might know, you know, if I know what he's what type of weapon he has, I can tell if I'm out of his range or so you know, or how much I got to travel to get to him. So this is useful to be able to know the distances even beyond what your ability to shoot is. Okay. All right. So now down here we're going to talk about the wind hold. So let's say we've got a wind. Okay. How are we going to use this reticle to help us figure out our wind hold? So the way I work is I basically record or compute everything off of a 10 mile per hour full value wind. Okay, so if the wind is 10 miles per hour, and I can tell with the wind ribbons, and I've done a separate video on this. If you know, you see the ribbons I've got hanging on trees here. If the ribbon's hanging like this, that's 0 wind. Okay. If it's all the way out here at 90-degree angle, that's 20 miles per hour. Okay. So 20, 15, 10, 5, 0. Okay. So again, so from here that's 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. All right. So you got 0 here, 20 there, and then you just divide the other numbers to determine what your wind is. And keep in mind that, you know, ideally you want to take this reading somewhere at the halfway point of where you're shooting, because the wind might be different here. It might be different, you know, 200 yards downrange. It might be different 500 yards downrange. So ideally you want to try and gauge what the wind's going to be somewhere in the middle. So if the wind is coming like sideways, right, at 90 degrees, that's a full value. Okay. If it's coming diagonally, right, you know, then it's a half value. Okay. So the question now becomes value of what? Okay. So here's the thing. If I got a 10 mile per hour wind, right, and here's the thing, if I determine that my wind is only 5 miles per hour, I just cut these numbers in half. If I determine that my wind is at 20 miles per hour, I just double these numbers. Okay, so off of the 10 mile per hour full value, you know, we can adjust for if it's double, or if it's half, or if it's coming in diagonally, we can cut this number in half. So that's why I like to work off of the 10 mile per hour wind hold. If I'm just like kind of working off the top of my head, right? I mean, if I got a chart and I got, you know, if I got like a table, that's fine. But a lot of times you're not going to have a table that you can refer to. That's why I like remembering like really basic stuff. Like I know, like, you know, at 200 yards, 10 mils, 300 yards, 6.5 mils, 400 yards, 5 mils, 500 yards, 4 mils. I can remember that stuff. Okay, you know, 1,000 yards, 2 mils, easy. You know, I can remember that easy stuff. Also, I can like put this easy stuff on a card or something, right? Because there's only so much information that you can write down and be able to glance at and be able to quickly pick up that information. So if you put too much information on a data card, it kind of becomes like it takes you too long to access that information. So I want to have the least amount of information, you know, that I have to go through, and I want to set up in such a way that's easy for me to quickly look at, access, and act upon. Okay, so going back here to my 10 mile per hour full value wind holds on a 5.56 caliber. Obviously, with different calibers, it's going to be different. Okay, so at 100 yards, a 10 mile per hour wind at full value, right, coming in sideways or 90 degrees, will move your bullet 1 inch. Okay, that's not even something I would bother to factor in. Okay, at 200 yards, okay, a 10 mile per hour wind will move your bullet about 6 inches. Okay, so as far as my wind hold, 6 inches is from here to here, basically, right? So basically, I would just hold at the shoulder, okay? That's for 10-mile-per-hour wind. If I got a 20-mile-per-hour wind, I would basically just double this distance. I would put the dot or the crosshair over here, right? So that's how I use this stuff to estimate, okay? So at 200 yards, 10-mile-per-hour wind, 10-mile-per-hour wind, that's just 6 inches over, which is basically from the center over to the shoulder, okay? Easy stuff. Now at 300 yards, it starts getting a little bit more interesting. At 300 yards, a 10-mile-per-hour wind is gonna move you a whole foot from here to like here somewhere. So to me, that's basically 1 mil. So if I assess that my wind is 10 miles per hour, okay, and I got a full value coming in sideways, okay, I would just basically, you know, I got to move over a foot. That's 1 mil. So I would move over one of these little lines over here, okay? Now, let's say this was a 20-mile-per-hour wind. You know, I would basically just move over 2 of these lines, okay? Or let's say I got 10-mile-per-hour wind, and, you know, which is one mil over, but it's coming in diagonally, okay? So now I got to cut that value in half. So now, instead of using 1 mil, I'll only use like half a mil, okay? So that's easy enough at 300 yards. At 400 yards, right? Same deal. 10-mile-per-hour wind, full value is 2 mils. So I gotta move 2 of these over. Okay. Again, if it's 20 miles per hour, then I would go double, 4 mils. Okay. Now, so that's 2 mils over here. And then if at 500 yards, okay, my basically that's gonna move my bullet about 3 feet. Okay, so this stuff kind of works pretty good. So at 100 yards, it's 1 inch. At 200 yards, it's about 6 inches. At 300 yards, it's a foot. 400 yards, it's 2 feet. 500 yards, it's 3 feet. Okay, so now it's not exactly like that, you know, it doesn't, but I've kind of rounded it off in such a way that I can easily remember, right? Because you can remember 1 inch, 6 inches, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. You know, that's something that you can easily remember, okay? And then same deal here. My holdover for wind, if it's a full value, 10 miles per hour, is 3 mils. So same deal here at 100 yards, basically no adjustment. At 200 yards, I just move over from the center over to the shoulder. At 300 yards, it's a full mil using my reticle. At 400 yards, it's 2 mils. And at 500 yards, a 10-mile-per-hour wind is 3 mils. Okay, so that's an easy way to remember this stuff. There's an easy way to use this reticle to do both range estimation, to do your holdovers, right? You can make notes based on the stuff I said, and also to do your wind holds. And then from that, you can kind of build up your own data, right? Which is going to come in slightly different based on your barrel length, the ammunition you're using, the height of your scope over your bore. You know, all these things are going to affect this a little bit. Okay. Now, I want to take a minute and talk to you guys about the greatness of this mill system. You know, why would you want to use this versus like the bullet drop compensator of, let's say, the ACSS? Because I love ACSS. I stopped using the mill dots in favor of that, but only because it's just easier to use. This is, this is something that can go beyond just sizing range based on the man. Okay, because this system, the way I presented it to you, is based on the size of a man. But what if you're not looking at the size of a man? What if you're looking at the size of a building? Okay, so there's a formula over here, right? And there's lots of channels that have covered this formula, but I didn't want to start with the formula, right? Because the formula, like, it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around sometimes, and it's like you're gonna say, okay, how can I do these calculations if I'm out on the move, if I'm under gunfire? So that's why I wanted to do the cheat notes first, okay? But now let's talk about the formula, all right? Let's talk about the formula. So what the formula is, you can estimate range, right, by taking the height, right? So the average man at 5'10" is about 72 inches, right? 72 inches tall, right? Now that, now you can also use the height of a door. Like if you know, like the average door is about like what, 82 inches. with the frame around it, it goes up to what, like 85 inches. So that's a known thing. Like every building is going to have a door, right? That's about 84 inches tall, and you can basically plug this and use this to do this calculation. So you're going to take the height. So going back to the height of a man here, right? Our man being 72 inches tall, and multiply it by this conversion factor, which is 27.78. 27.78. So I'm going to pull out the calculator. Now you might say, first thing you're going to say is, hey, wait a second. End of the world apocalypse, who's going to have calculators? I got to tell you guys, man, with the solar powered calculators, I got solar powered calculators from like 25, 30 years ago, from a kid. That when I was a kid, they still work. All right, back then, like when I was a kid, these things, the solar powered ones, were something like $200, $250, right, back in the early 80s, right? They still work, right? The battery inside it may not work, but if you've got sunlight, these things are going to work. So this is probably like the last electronic, the last piece of electronic that's going to die out, right, after the apocalypse. This will be the last piece of electronic that dies out. Okay. So especially with the small one, obviously I grabbed the big one here because I'm an ex-accountant. All right. For those of you guys that don't know, in my prior life I was a chief financial officer before I started doing all this fun stuff. Okay. But anyway, so normally you'd have a much smaller one. So our man is 72 inches tall. So we're going to take 72, multiply it times this conversion factor, right, which is 27.78. 27.78. Okay, that's the number. You multiply the height in inches by that number, 27.78, and you get some value. Right now, this came out to about 2,000. Okay, all right, which is easy because you can think of that, right? Your man is going to be have, that's a good starting point, 2,000. Okay, so now you look in your scope and you see how tall he is, right? So if I look in my scope and I see that my guy mills in at 5, you're not going to divide this by 5, hit the equal, and what do I get? I get 400 yards. Okay, so let's do it. Let's start with the 2,000, right? Because that's a really convenient number, right? 2,000. Because maybe you may not remember 72 inches multiplied by 27.78, right? But you can remember 2,000. So 2,000. Let's say my guy mills in at 6.5. So divide that by 6.5. There you go. He's coming in at about 300 yards. I mean, it came out to 307, but you know, we're just estimating here. Okay. Same deal. Let's say my guy. Let's start off with that 2,000 number, right? Which is the product of 72 times 27.78. Divide that by the 4 mils. Divided by 4 mils, right? Oops, something wrong there. 2,000 divided by 4 comes in at exactly 500. Okay. So now here's the thing, right? This is not just for, you know, you can use other things besides a person. So here's the thing, end of the world apocalypse, right? Let's say I gotta go, you know, I'm out here in Pennsylvania. I gotta go retrieve one of my relatives from New York City, right? There's no gas, basically I'm on foot, you know. So as you're approaching New York City, one of the buildings, one of the first buildings that I'm going to see is the Empire State Building. Okay, so I can see the height of the Empire State Building. Okay, and through printed books, I know that the height of the Empire State Building is 15,000 inches. Right, the number is 1,250 feet. When you multiply that by 12, it comes out to 15,000 inches, which is an easy number I can remember, right? And now I got it in the video so I can refer back to it in the future if I need to. So the height of the Empire State Building is 15,000 inches, which you can see from a long distance, right? So if I know the height of the Empire State Building, right, and I look at it through my reticle, right? So let's plug that in now. Empire State Building, 15,000, and I look through my reticle and I see that the Empire State Building is, let's say, let's say 8 mils, right? I look through it, I see 8 mils. So divide that by 8. Okay, that's going to give me a number of 1,872. So now I got, because that's in yards. now I got to convert that into miles. So to convert that into miles, I got to, I forgot what I got to do. It's in yards. I got to divide that by the miles. Divide that by 1760. And yeah, I'm 1 mile away. All right. So if I'm approaching the Empire State Building, and I look through my scope and it's at that height, I know that I'm 1 mile away. Let's use a different number. Let's do it again. I'm approaching the Empire State Building. I know that it's 15,000 inches tall. All right, so 15,000 times the 27.78. Did I do that right earlier? Maybe I didn't. I don't know. But anyway, I come up with a number. And now I'm going to basically look at my reticle. Let's say it comes in at 5. So I'm going to divide that by 5. All right, I come out with a number of 87,000. All right, 87,000 yards. Okay, 87,507 yards. So now that's in yards. So now I need it in miles. So now I'm going to divide that by 1760. And I'm 49 miles away. Okay, I know that number's right because I did this earlier. The earlier number I might have got mixed up in my mind a little bit, but this number I know is right, 49, because I did this earlier. So last thing, you can use, an object. It could be a mountain, something that you know the height to, and use that to determine the distance that you are away from it. Let's do this Empire State Building again. All right, so 15,000. Right, that's my inches. That's how many inches tall the Empire State Building is. All right, multiply it by the 27.78. I think the first time I forgot to multiply it, but anyway, times 27.78. Okay, 416. Okay, I look in my scope. Let's say this time I see let's say 2 mils. Right, so I'm going to divide that by 2. Okay, I get a number of 208,000 yards. Now I'm going to divide that by 1760. Okay, I'm 118 miles away. Okay, so it's kind of like the halfway point from where I'm at. Now I'm not going to be able to see it. I know at 118 miles away, I'm not going to be able to see the entire Empire State Building. But once I get to the point at which it's going to become visible to me in New Jersey, I'm going to be about 50 miles away. So when I first see it, it'll be about 5 or maybe 5 or 4 or maybe 6 mils away. So I'm not going to be able to see it this far away. I mean, it's just you just can't see it that far away. This is fun, right? You can play around with this. I want to go back to the earlier one I did because I know I screwed that up somehow. Okay, let's do that again. So 15,000. That's the height of the Empire State Building in inches. Multiply it by 27.78. All right. And then divide it. Now remember the first time I did 8 mils, right? So divided by 8. Okay, gives me 52, a number of 52,000, right? And so that's in yards. So now I'm going to take my yards and divide it by the 1760. Divided by 1760. I'm 30 miles away. So yeah, the first time when I said 1 mile, I'm pretty sure I screwed that up. I don't know. I just made a mistake. I would be at the point where the Empire State Building is 8 mils tall. It is about 30 miles away. Okay, so this is a reason why, like, special forces and the military in general, they use the mil system. They don't use the like ACSS bullet drop compensator, because they can use things like that, like buildings, mountains, the height of an airplane, right? Anything that they can, or pretty much the height of any building, right? Because they can probably, in the United States anyway, they can look at the plans, to any building, and they can know how tall it is. So it's really easy for them to do range estimation like that. So fun stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know this was interesting and fun. I kind of got caught up in the video with all the calculations, which is the reason why I left this stuff at the end of the video, right? Because I realized that can get a little boring. But the easy way, know these numbers. At 200 yards, your man is 10 mils. At 300 yards, your man is 6.5 mils. At 400 yards, your man is 400 mils. And at 500 yards, your man is 4 mils. Okay, those are easy numbers that you can make a note of, as well as some of the other stuff that I mentioned. So let me know how you guys like the video. Drop some comments below. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe. And also make sure you guys are following me on all my channels, because I'm always at risk of being suspended by YouTube or having my channels deleted. So on YouTube, I got Absolute Gun Rights, Pocono Shooting, and the original Safa channel, which goes back to 2006. Okay. And then on the uncensored platforms, on Odyssey, I'm Pocono Tactical. On Rumble, I'm Pocono Guns. And on BitChute, I'm also Pocono Tactical. We'll talk again soon.